You are listening live to KDUX Web Radio, broadcast live from Richland College in Dallas, Texas. We are the voice of Richland College. Views expressed on this show are our own unless otherwise stated and do not reflect the opinion of KDUX Web Radio, Richland College, or the DCCCD. We are the Philosophy Club Radio Hour, and our topic today is closure. I'm Hannah.
I'm Trace.
This is Jessica.
Hello.
Skylar.
Matt.
Marcus.
Orlando.
Raphael.
And Raphael.
And then Jason over here. Way far over here. So I'm going to let... I was unfortunately out for the actual philosophy club, so I'm going to let the people who were there to do the re-quack for Thunder Ducks.
So basically, we talked about closure for the full hour. And it kind of went all over the place. We talked about what it is, how it relates to healing, whether it's even emotional or not, whether closure is something that you find in a relationship, or whether closure is more something that you have when you find your keys after losing them. So the discussion kind of went all over the place. But I think we kind of left with this idea that maybe the best, most succinct way to describe closure would be as finding peace of mind, and as this step, not necessarily forward or backward, but I don't know, almost as a sort of rationalization of events that allows us to move forward, changed. That's kind of, I guess, not really a conclusion, but kind of a definition that it seemed we came to. But we left off specifically with the question that I was curious to hear some of y'all's responses. Was closure the embracing or acceptance of the event, or is it perhaps an avoidance of that? For instance, if we're trying to find closure in a relationship, would closure be some, embracing that pain and feeling it and trying to move on afterwards, or is closure finding someone else with which you can ignore that pain? So I was curious to hear your thoughts on that.
I would say it's probably a mixture of all of those. It could be. I would think it depends on the person. Whether what they want to seek out of it. I think for all of those kinds of emotions of avoiding, embracing, or accepting, I think the end result is still, at the end of it, is closure. Is that if you're accepting it and that it's over, it's not going to be on your mind anymore. You're not going to think about it. It's going to be solved for you. If you're avoiding it, well, then it's the same thing. And embracing it, well, essentially what you're trying to do is you're trying to blind out all of the pain. And for, once again, closure.
That's interesting, yeah. Honestly, I would think that it's more of an acceptance rather than a denial of what the pain you're going through. I think it's more recognizing it and being okay with it rather than trying to cover it up and put a Band-Aid over it by, in your example of a relationship, using another person to cover that pain or to cover that, the heartbreak that you feel.
Anyone else have anything to add?
Yeah, sure.
All right, we're done.
Look you guys up.
Good job, guys.
Well, I think, like we're kind of discovering here, there's no one way that, say, two people have the same problem. All right, they just got broken up. Their heart is broken. They're not going to find the same way to find closure. Meaning, the peace of mind that we come to with closure is obviously going to be different with each person, and then kind of that leads each person to kind of take their own measures to either accept the pain or deny it in some way that resolves, like we said, to rationalize the pain in some way to a point of acceptance or, quote, closure. I don't think there's that any one, was that what we were saying? Because, closure isn't just one thing, it's not.
It's
there's
one
nothing
thing,
one
it takes
thing
on
that
different forms.
Yeah, it's exactly that. Where it's something that is, it's just an event, I would call it. It's not like a thing you do. It's just something that happens due to you coming to certain conclusions. And it's not a thing that you do in and of itself, but it's just a happening that happens as you kind of resolve.
Yeah.
It's an internal change.
Yeah.
So essentially it's person to person, and how they deal with it differently. Would you say? Yeah, okay. So if someone is more open to pain or someone is more open to embracing things, then in that sense they would do that differently.
Yeah, and then I mean, some people might seek out closure in a way where they, need the other person to kind of like explain to them, like to heal those wounds of the pain, or they can somehow find closure within themselves. Like there's also different ways to find closure.
Sure.
It's kind of just what's the easiest way to get peace of, not necessarily the easiest, but most efficient to you as a person, or preferred, you could say, as a person. Like, do you prefer, like, do you enjoy the confrontation, like after a breakup, that way for sure, or are you just that like confident or comfortable with yourself to where you can come to the closure yourself without the other person? So again, it's like very malleable. I feel like closure's weird. That's why.
I mean, yeah, whenever you're dealing with human emotions, it's going to be subjective. I've noticed that's a trend I've noticed coming from the past few philosophy clubs, is that the term subjective seems to be a dirty word. But whenever we're dealing with it, like that's what the human experience and our view of reality is always going to be subjective. And I don't think that's such a bad thing. But as long as we're, saying under these subjective circumstances, X, Y, and Z can happen.
Well, since we've come to the conclusion that it is subjective in that sense, would you guys say that there's a healthier version of closure in comparison to other things? Because we kind of keep going around.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like
Absolutely.
that. Meaning like almost like a false sense of like closure, where you convince yourself that you are actually like, oh, okay, this is closed.
Yeah.
But then like obviously like say down the road, like something happens in your life that somehow opens up like that wound again, and so obviously that's not proper closure then. So maybe there is a proper way to go about closure. Okay. So what would that be? Does that involve the other
That's
person?
actually, that goes off of one of my theories, that I don't really believe closure exists.
Mm.
I think closure is just repeated exposure to traumas until like you learn to deal with it. Yeah. Often I bring up the argument of a dead parent. Like, I don't think you ever really recover from losing your parents. You just learn to live every day without them.
Well, that's what we were talking about earlier, though, when we were saying acceptance. Is that essentially you're moving along with the tide in the sense that you could either be sad about it and remain sad about it, or I guess to this definition of closure that we came to is to say we're gonna find a way to cope with it, or maybe to make it easier on us. And I guess maybe in that sense it isn't closure. So I guess you're right. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's an ongoing process, I think.
Yeah.
A lot of people think of it as an end goal when it's really the whole
that
train of
healing, though?
things.
Isn't that healing?
I would argue yes, but to think of closure as like an end point is kind of an odd point to cut off healing.
But I think that we're confusing or conflating closure and healing and coping. It seems to me that closure, like the abstract concept of closure is this specific point in time or the specific event. That
Not necessarily. Maybe you can have achieve different levels of closure, right? Like, a month after, hospital, or God forbid, I'm sorry, that a parent dies, that a month afterwards it would still hurt, but you would be able to obtain some sort of closure in some certain circumstances. I guess it's just dependent. I mean, maybe 2 years from then you could think that you were completely okay, right? But then you would realize that you're not as okay as you thought, or you would recognize that you have a different level of closure. Does that make sense? So in one sense, healing and closure are kind of two of the same things. They're married together. They are different, but they like how two circles are drawn, and you draw one circle and it's inside the other circle.
The overlap.
But it seems like to me you'd never find closure in the loss of a parent, because that's not
Right.
something that you bring an end to, because they continue to be a part of you,
So then,
and not physically or spiritually, but in the sense that they continue on in your memory, right? So, to me, it seems that what's up? It seems to me that that's more healing, right? Because you continue with their memory, you don't get rid of it. Whereas
Right.
closure is this idea of bringing an end to something. You don't end your relationship with your parent in the sense that you just close it down and forget about it.
yeah, I have to agree with what Trey said. Basically, I think I was going to say about the same thing, is that it seems to be more situational. I wouldn't go as far as to say that closure doesn't exist, because in the situation where we're talking about the dead parents, then yeah, in that instance, I would say it doesn't exist in that instance. But in something like a breakup of a relationship, you're not gonna go on being heartbroken forever. You're gonna eventually forget about that person, and in that sense, closure can come for sure.
What if so we said closure comes from an attempt to deal with trauma in some way. What if we keep using this example. That's kind of why I want to address it, like the death situation, where it's like there's some person around you that dies, and that's something that you like almost can't fully heal from. So what if there's like a type of trauma, like i.e. death? Okay, that's we could say worst trauma to happen. What if that type of trauma is like causes, because it's so severe, we start to have a different relationship with it, where it's almost like not possible to have full closure, as we can see, where it's like, oh, no matter how length of time goes by, like even if, this comes up, I'm not going to like have a reaction to it because I have like full closure of it. But death, maybe because it's like this certain type of, event happening, different than any other type of thing you have closure with, you could say, that it has that relationship where it kind of can dig into us no matter the time that it happens in, where we can still have this like withdrawal into ourselves of that like traumatic event again whenever we get exposed to it, like down the road. Even if we had like proper closure, like say someone like found some really like heartfelt letter that their dad wrote them before he died, and then they find it 25 years later, and then they start crying. Is it like they're emotional? Is it like they still miss him? Like do they like this is maybe I'm just playing with emotions right here. Maybe I'm just confusing having emotions with closure. I don't know. Like is closure like an act of saying I'm not going to have a reaction to this type of thing again, or like, because let's talk about that, because like closure is kind of just
like it stops or something. Like,
yeah, like
something like when there's like, okay, the government can decide to, let's say, maybe stop taxes. There's a closure on that, on taxes. There will be no taxes this year. There's a closure on that. Does that make sense? Like in relation to what? Like, yeah, that makes like is that closure itself? Is that what you're saying? Like, yeah.
I want to say it's like, well, closure is that them like not doing tax. It's more like just getting rid of taxes. Is like getting rid of something, closing it. Like, is that the same as it?
I feel like to me, there's a reason we have this idea. We have expressions, bring it to a close, to end something.
Yeah,
so closure to me seems ending something.
Yeah.
Because we have to remember what we're talking about are perceptions and emotions and feelings, which are like the most fundamental aspects, in my opinion, of
human expression,
the human experience, right? So when we pin ourselves to a certain name, we have to forget that the name, the semantics, comes after the actual feeling or perception or mental process. So I think we can go back and forth about these names, like, is coping closure, is closure the same thing as healing? But the problem is we're on the surface with semantics. I feel like we have to go deeper and figure out, okay, let's say closure is bringing something to a close, ending something. What does that look like? Because I feel like it's easy to get caught up in this back and forth of, healing kind of means this and closure could kind of mean that. But I feel like we need to go deeper and say, okay, let's say closure is bringing something to an end, because that's the name, right? Yeah. Where do we find that, and where do we see that?
Yeah.
So maybe closure is something a little more tangible than healing. Like, should we aspire to closure, or should we aspire to healing? Or is closure a stop on the way to healing?
I feel like closure is a point
Okay.
in time.
Agreed.
Maybe one that's... maybe it's not a singular point. I suppose it could be a collection of points.
More like a happening, you could say.
But I feel like closure is not not a continuous process. It's not a line. I feel like it can be a continuous process in the sense that we go from point to point. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I feel like there are specific parts to closure, whereas healing, because there's a point and then there's a line, right? A line is a continuation of a single point. I feel like that's healing.
Yeah, agreed.
Healing is a point that we then create a line with. But I feel like even if closure is taking place over an extended amount of time, it's still just a collection of points. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, I see.
And I feel like closure itself is the kind of, like we said, the resolution, like the end point, where it's like the last point. Like, that's closure itself. And I want to kind of try to describe that event and, like, we see closure. Someone needs closure for something. All right, this something happened to them. All right, events have happened around them to cause their emotional or inside, workings to kind of disrupt themselves of their norm. All right, they're kind of like, disturbed in some way because of this happening. All right, and they're all jumbled up and confused, and that's why you get this like feeling of anxiety or something, like it's not right because like the things are jumbled up. All right, because of that happening. All right, and then say closure is kind of just like it is the final part
stage.
of you kind of squishing everything back into the place where it's supposed to be, and where you no longer have this sense of disarray within yourself because you've reaccumulated yourself back to the or you could say not necessarily the same point of standing that you had before the event, but more of like a newly formed point of yourself from like that experience. Almost that's kind of closure. It's almost like this is your point of being like, okay, I was about to say like you can't hear me on the radio, or see me on the radio, but anyway, say there's a point. Oh man, I forgot what I was gonna say now. That's stupid. Okay. But yeah, that kind of situation.
Yeah, it's like what I don't remember who said it yesterday, that there's this disparity between what is and what ought to be, and I think grieving or healing or whatever you want to call it is a process where we come to terms with what it is, whereas closure is where we come to terms with what ought to be.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
For instance, I'll use an example from my own life. I don't like using examples from my own life because I feel like I'm trying to get sympathy. But look, I lost someone really close, and it was sudden in the sense that like maybe the hour before we thought that, we had the rest of the life, and then the next hour it's like, oh, never mind. So for me, healing is coming to terms with that loss. Closure is this idea that what if I'd done something else?
Where it's like, okay,
right?
this
So
happened
that
and it was
specific
almost out of my
point.
control.
Well,
What if
kinda-
I'd done something different?
I kind of see
An
that.
hour before, 2 hours before, made a different decision that day. That's closure to me, is coming to terms with what didn't happen, that specific what didn't happen, what ought to be, that specific point. Whereas healing, grieving, whatever you want to call it, is just coming to terms with what is.
I feel like it's a little different than that to me, because I feel like healing doesn't necessarily mean you're healed. I feel like healing is the process of working towards being healed. And so in that sense, couldn't we be related in the similar manner to say when we're healing, we're working towards closure? Isn't that fair to say, especially when it comes to emotional things?
Maybe a sense of closure.
I don't think so.
Maybe not closure itself.
Because in healing, let me give you a sentence.
We're
Like
moving to
I
closure,
am.
but we're not in the
We haven't
spot
achieved it yet.
We
Yeah,
haven't achieved it yet.
like I am still healing. I haven't necessarily healed.
Yeah.
So I don't think necessarily that as a point. I think healing in and of itself is the process. I am healing. I'm not yet healed.
The act of healing.
Yeah.
But I
So
also
there's no
don't
closure
think...
to that.
Oh, go ahead.
Yet our topic today is closure. Remember that, guys.
Yeah,
well,
we're relating healing to closure. That's why we're.
I don't think closure has to do with that either. For instance, like you brought up yesterday with the idea of keys. You lose our keys. Can closure be as simple as finding keys? And again, I think that goes back to this ought to be. Like, I ought to have my keys. And so coming to terms with this ought to be, again, I feel like we see closure.
What if it's almost like a resolution to this story? Meaning, like, it doesn't seem like there's an end. Say, like, okay, you're sad about your friend, like, passing away. All right, that makes sense. But then that doesn't seem as if it's the end of the story because you're not resolved about it yet, right? Like, that shouldn't be the end if you're just sad. So that's why you kind of feel this, like, something's not right here because you're not at the end of, like, the story yet of that happening. Meaning, like, this happened, you're sad about it, but you're not at the end of it yet because you're not okay with it. And that's closure, is, like, the end to the story of that situation that has disrupted you to a point where you need closure. You see what I mean?
More like end of a
doesn't that-
chapter.
Yeah,
Isn't that
but
kind of
it's like it's
rated?
the end. But it's like the end itself, meaning that like what we were just saying.
End of the chapter, not the book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah, okay,
yeah.
yes,
I see
that's it.
I see
Okay,
that.
I didn't say.
Okay.
I didn't come up with that.
That was me.
Who came up with that? Well, that was
Not me.
good.
I wish.
Congrats. No, I'm just kidding.
But I have a question though.
Yeah.
Is closure a good thing or a bad thing?
oh, good,
Depends.
good.
I would
I would say there's no-
That is
both.
a bold state.
It's
I don't know if
definitely
always
a
good.
thing.
I don't know if there's such thing as bad closure. I feel like anything that's bad closure isn't actually closure. It's just
Okay,
it's
what do
just
I
Are we
can
like,
counter
talking
that.
about this
Okay,
relative
so-
good for you or
Perceived.
bad for you, or are we talking about a metaphysical
Okay,
good?
so let's look at it this way. You know, somebody murders someone that's close to me, and in order to find closure, I go murder the person that murdered. Is
Liam
that a
Neeson.
bad closure?
Is that good
Yeah,
closure or
that
bad
is-
closure?
I-
Hey,
I feel
listen, that's
Liam
good closure.
Neeson-
okay, no. Let's say
That we can all agree
this.
that's bad
Liam
closure,
Neeson.
right?
I feel like
I would
okay.
think, yeah, I would say so, definitely.
There's any
Exactly. That in a metaphysical sense or in a societal.
Yeah.
This is the overarching norms of our society, and Liam Neeson looking for closure by clubbing black people. That's good for him if he finds closure, but bad metaphysically speaking, right? So I think there's
I feel like that's a false sense of closure, meaning like they
To
were
you, that's a
seeking
false sense of
no,
closure?
like they were seeking out closure of any kind, okay? And there's different ways to achieve like that sense of closure. You could
to
say
you, but maybe he didn't feel it that way. Maybe there's
okay,
only
yeah,
one
maybe
way.
I'm gonna still call him like having a false sense of closure, meaning like that's not the most preferred outcome. Let's say closure is like the most
Preferred by whom?
Looks like
like
we're
So
going back to
false
that
in
first
your
argument.
sense of values is what you're
let's say
saying.
like in an overarching sense, meaning like there might be a proper way to go about closure, not trying to kill someone in an act of revenge. Like,
Right,
is
so
that
that's-
proper closure?
So
Is
that's a
killing
societal
someone-
norm, right? That's like an overarching and quasi metaphysical idea that murdering people is bad, therefore your seeking closure is bad.
Yeah.
Right? But maybe it's not bad for him.
So in terms of our social norms, I guess you could describe it as bad. But I would,
So-
well, we've already decided that it's something that's subjective, didn't we? Didn't we already say that?
Are we
There's-
back to the point where like everything good and bad is just subjective?
Essentially, that's what-
everything
we went
boils
to.
down to that.
Essentially, we've
To what?
kind- we've
If you want
kind
to
of
solve
settled
all
down
of
here.
life problems, tell me if good things are good and bad things are bad. That's the only way you're going to solve everything.
the
is.
answer
Otherwise-
is always it depends.
Oh,
See, exactly. See,
Jason said. Jason said that closure is personal. It doesn't matter what anybody thinks around you. Closure
Agreed.
is an act of.
Yeah.
It's your personal well-being.
so we're
It's-
back to square one.
Yeah.
within the
Yeah, pretty much.
individual.
So we're basically awesome.
I'd like to bring this up. What about cases in which you don't get closure?
So like, what happens to you? Is that the question? Like, if you don't get closure?
What do you think?
Did you die?
So like, yeah, like, so
You
say you
get
don't get
first,
closure.
then you die.
What next is that?
Evolution comes
My
first.
boyfriend broke up with me, so I just died instantly on the spot. That's how it works, guys. That's how closure
Wow.
works.
Philosophy.
Where you find a new one? Just kidding. Maybe.
Oh man. Okay.
This
What
dead air was brought to you by the
I'm trying to like rummage my brain. For, like,
I'm just
we
like,
go-
okay,
we go on a
gonna
Valentine's Day,
who's gonna
and
be the
nobody
first
has
one?
anything to say.
about
It's
Valentine's
kind of
Day.
an ironic thing to have. It's an ironic topic to
Yeah,
have on
honestly.
Valentine's Day
Oh yeah.
because Valentine's Day is kind of.
I'm sorry, Valentine's Day. Don't get me started.
I know,
Either
maybe.
either you
Talk
have
about
someone in
Talk
your
about
life
Valentine's
that's
Day,
too
yeah.
important for Valentine's Day, or you don't have anyone and you need Valentine's to feel good about yourself. Like I'm sorry.
Who
that's
uses
Valentine's.
May I
Valentine's
say
to
this
feel
one
good about
topic
themselves?
about
though?
Valentine's
Like, what do you do?
Day,
Buy
though?
yourself a giant teddy bear?
That or you find
surprised how
someone to
many
be your
people box of
Valentine.
chocolates.
I think a real
That
important
works though. Box of chocolates. That's valid.
Yeah.
I think a real important question to ask when we're talking about this on our Valentine's Day podcast is, what is love? Baby, don't hurt me.
No more.
Don't hurt me no more.
Oh, nice. Let's just have like a good little 5 minutes of singing. Yeah, let's just do that.
Karaoke.
Yeah.
Let's talk about love then,
What?
since it is Valentine's. Let's
What?
transition into.
Yeah, you were the one that said you liked my Instagram post. I see.
Oh no, I said that, but like,
Wait.
what are you talking about? What
So
are
are
you
we
talking
signing
about?
the bill or
Hey man,
declaring
I don't know.
national
It's a
emergency?
group
Which one are we
text.
doing? It's
Everything
like,
gets all
That was a
messed
good
up.
Shouldn't we be
post,
doing one or the
though.
other? Why is it
That was a
both?
good post. If anybody's listening, go check out our last Instagram post. It was spot on.
Yes, it was.
So do we believe love is a mental illness? Is everyone born
Absolutely.
in like with a mental illness? Thing?
Yeah, Mandy was like, make sure everybody knows it's you were talking about, and not me. I was like, oh, ouch.
Okay, so are we switching topics or something?
No, we're not.
Okay.
Closure,
aw.
guys, closure.
Can we have closure with this topic?
Yeah.
Let's just get
Ooh, meta joke.
Are we ever going to find closure with this topic is the real question. Does closure with this topic exist?
Perhaps.
There's
not.
the
Oh, sorry, that's
question.
quite the question. Does closure exist for closure? Does it even?
Oh my god, I'm laughing too much,
Oh
man.
gosh,
Okay.
I think we've kind of exhausted the topic.
Same.
I think the same
Just
thing.
kidding.
it's
yeah.
been exhausting.
I feel the same way.
because it's.
Closure is exhausting.
Seriously.
Is closure ethical? How about that?
What?
in the world?
Yes. Unless your closure is killing someone, then no.
Liam Neeson.
Gosh, Liam Neeson, what's dude?
Dude, don't talk bad about Liam Neeson. He's gonna
Alright.
show up at your door.
It's like, I will find you.
Like I heard the philosophy radio.
Yeah.
He's like
This
cryptid.
guy, Marcus Russell. How do you talk like
I
Liam
have
Neeson?
a particular set of skills.
Yeah. How do you? Does anyone
Talk
have a good
about me one more
impression of
time.
Liam Neeson? A really good
No,
impression.
I don't. I
I
don't.
can't do a Scottish accent.
I will find
Oh,
you.
no. Or something else. I don't know. I can't remember.
And it'll turn you
That'll kill
into
you.
a moralist.
Good luck.
Oh
You're
man,
really good
we have-
Zorro
Can we
accent.
talk about celebrities and their like inconsistent values?
No.
How they're really messed up
closure.
as
We
people.
have-
Closure, boys.
We have like 11 minutes left. Let's just come on. These 10 minutes. Let's just have a preview
Yeah,
of the
man.
next.
I think I've had closure on the closure topic.
Yeah,
to be
me
honest.
too. Same here.
I think I've had an
Yes,
internal
but the
piece.
live audience has not gotten closure because we're not
they have
done
feedback?
yet.
Our whole one audience.
Audience, how you feeling?
Let's recap.
How you feeling about closure?
Okay, so I just looked up closure on Google. So closure
That'll tell
means
us.
Oh,
finality.
We could have done that the whole time.
I know.
see? Brought it to a close. That's finality, right?
Oh, there.
Closure means finality, letting go of what once was. Finding closure implies the complete acceptance of what has happened and an honoring of the transition away from what's finished to something new. So let's talk about this. Do you have to have closure before you move on to something new?
Nope.
Well, not like you don't have
It's called
to.
drugs.
Yeah.
in a positive direction.
Oh god.
What is wrong with you, Trace?
Just
Not
saying,
positive.
like, look,
The
if
Philosophy
you
Club does
suffer
not promote
trauma or
drugs.
something, and you need to move on, and you don't want closure.
You know, like when you lose your leg and you take morphine and then eventually you reach
Yeah, dude, just get over your leg, bro. You don't need morphine. Gosh, you trying to cope with the Get over it, bro.
Wow, this took a very dark turn. Should I be worried about these people? Philosophy,
bit.
guys, this is what it does to you.
Yeah, it makes you existentially.
Always comes
like,
back to
critical.
metaphysics and drugs.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And World War II.
The lesson is take drugs.
Uh,
What, huh? English? Where did English originate from?
It's Germanic.
No one knows.
Oh, I don't know. Yeah.
That's why it's the worst language in the world.
think about this question then. How do deaf people, okay, since they sign, right? What do they think inside their heads when they're thinking? Because we think in English, don't we? Like, I want a
Pictures.
sandwich.
Well, that's
You
an
think, "I
interesting
want a
thing to bring
sandwich."
up because bilingual people, they don't think in English or Spanish. They think in a third code that they translate to either language.
Oh.
Wait, what?
What? I didn't know I could
No,
do
yeah,
that.
there was a case
So,
study
like-
done on this.
This is very
I've
interesting.
heard
Can we talk
this.
about this?
Yeah, I've heard about that. Yeah.
No, yeah, it's basically that. It's like their brains are quite malleable because they grew up learning two types of languages.
Mhm.
And so they think in like a third, I kind of think of it as like binary, and then you translate it to either languages.
So
I feel like that's different
But-
though for people that learn another
I'm
language.
trying to imagine how that
later.
works in the brain though, like
I think
actively
it's- your
thinking.
brain
How
is
does
very
their mind
different.
think? Because when I'm thinking like, all right, like I have a thought, I'm gonna say a sentence in my head. I said a sentence in my head. Like what does that translate to for them?
Well,
Or can they
You still have that sentence in your
So
head. It just
strange.
doesn't sound like a particular language. as
That's
a
crazy.
bilingual.
That's so interesting.
It also has to do with like
So
a
it's like
lot
stem
what he said
cells.
about how it changes when you're older because you have different neuroplasticity as you grow up. And that's why
Interesting. I see
most
that.
people, if you want to learn a language, learn it while they're very young, like still in grade school.
But also, I think when you learn another language later on, for instance, if you move to another country and learn the language, it's the problem is if you grow up speaking one language, you originally learn by seeing things, right? So you don't see a chair and call it chair. You just see it has four legs, it has a back, and you eventually learn to identify with that with chair. If you speak one language, eventually I think they become synonymous, right? So the image of a chair and the word chair become one. But if you're trying to learn another language, I think you have to disconnect your primary language from the image and to be able to connect that other language to the image, right?
To
You
bring
have
closure to it?
Oh my gosh. Let's not.
Let's do.
to no.
Please forget.
That's my girl. That's my girl.
Oh no.
I pride myself.
So you were saying, Trace.
Wow, I see how it is, Orlando.
I want closure on your closure.
Okay, what's the difference between closure and conclusion? And this
Conclusion's
is
what
the
you put at the end of a
conclusion
paper.
of our podcast.
Oh no.
I,
I like
I would
that
say
last-
closure is much more emotional,
brain
probably.
hurts.
And that concludes our episode.
Awesome.
Let's see. Any plugs?
Follow me on. No, I'm just kidding.
Richland
Get my
philosophy.
mixtape on SoundCloud.
Oh, okay.
Nice.
That was
Can we honestly make a mixtape?
okay.
Let's make a mixtape. Yeah.
Dude, I was looking
That
at
was a
some
meme,
really
don't
fire
worry.
beats. I say,
Lyrical miracles.
okay, let's play a beat, bro.
Let's play a beat. Let's play a beat. Oh no.
Okay, so today is Valentine's Day. Closure was our topic for Valentine's Day. To everyone who is interested in having fun like we just did, please come and join us on Tuesdays from 2 to 3 for the Philosophy Club. And if you can't make it, Thursdays from 2 to 3 in the radio room for Philosophy Club Radio Hour. And we discuss a new topic a new topic every week. And sorry, some of us are just getting over the flu, so
Do we know what our topic is for next week?
we don't. We do. Do we? Trace?
Yeah, it's going to be religion. Does religion inhibit the progress of humanity?
Mm-hmm. So I think that should be an interesting topic.
Oh, it's gonna get heated.
A lot of strong opinions.
That's a good one. That's a good
I'm trying to act normal.
This
while
guy is
takes pictures
taking
of us.
pictures.
I'm just like, what's going
I
on?
mean, I'm low
right
key
now?
posing. What's up? I
I'm
mean,
trying to smile. He's over here. Okay, he's got you. He got you.
Go away.
Okay. All right, guys. You are listening to KDUX Web Radio, broadcast live from Richland College in Dallas, Texas. Excuse me. We are the voice of Richland College. Views expressed on this show are Manzi's own and do not reflect the opinion of KDUX Web Radio, Richland College, or the DCCCD. And we are the Philosophy Club Radio Hour. It's been fun, folks. Think about it.